Welcome back to Confessions of a Time Monk. We're actually back in Bagna di Lucca at the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research. And this 2 days we're at a conference that's actually titled The New Paradigm in Holistic Health and Well-Being. And we're having the opportunity to actually learn about new technologies, new methods in healing. And we have the pleasure today of actually sitting with a gentleman who did a presentation this morning on a technology that he's bringing into the marketplace. And this is Simon Fox.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome, thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
And Simon, you introduced a technology which you actually plugged into the walls today, and my experience of it was in fact quite particular in that there was something happening on interdimensional levels, not just on a cleaning up the electromagnetic field in the room.
Absolutely.
Can you speak a bit about the technology and then the origins of it?
So I based the talk very much on multidimensionality, the multidimensional universe, because to leave that out, it wouldn't make any sense anymore. As everything comes from these higher levels and is projected downwards, that's where we have to go for our solutions as well. Now, there's a problem here for us humans, which is the span of our focus, of our attention, is limited. And, working on it, obviously, it's what we call raising your consciousness. Really what we mean by that is being able to move that attention a little further beyond the body. But in a way, we're still babies in that field. We're right at the start of, if you like, of that evolution, if it's a linear process, which it probably isn't.
Let's hope it's not linear.
Yes,
we're
exactly.
in big trouble if it's linear.
Long, long time.
Yes.
A researcher friend of mine tells me that we are conscious in 144 dimensions.
144.
144, not 145 or 143. There's a mathematical reason for that, which I don't understand. It's divided in octaves of 12. So the first 12 of these dimensional layers would be most easily accessible to us. But we're right at the start of exploring that as humanity. Now, I was very inspired by the idea that I came across that for us to pull ourselves out of our own mess would be virtually impossible. We need help.
Yes.
So I set out to obtain that help. That can only come from a consciousness which is beyond our own. What I mean by that is their focus of attention, therefore awareness, is not within the dimensions that we operated. It is higher. Each dimension encapsulates all of those beneath it. So if you have a being which say spans the 5th to the 12th dimensions in their awareness, that encapsulates also where we are.
But how are they able to see us where we are? Because my understanding also is that we're not as visible individually at this level as we are when we're a collective.
In my experience, channeling beings who are in that kind of position, or even using record keeper crystals which give you a connection to one consciousness, but it is on an elevated perspective level, elevated dimensional plane, they then have that perspective. So I would say, in my experience, we are visible enough. Maybe not the things that we find particularly important, certain things about form and color and whatever it might be. We're seen as energy, but it seems to be really obvious from an elevated perspective, what we need.
Right.
And now this process of creating a solution, now my solution involves bringing, as I explained, natural elements into the living space, using the electrical system as a propagator of that.
So just describe the technology.
I'll describe
for
that very, very briefly.
Yes.
So it is using the electricity grid, which is normally a stressing factor. It's
In the
normally a
house
stress
or in the
factor
building.
in a building, using that to propagate healing scalar waves.
And scalar waves.
Scalar as opposed to vector. Vector has direction. Scalar waves actually as opposed to transverse waves, right, which travel and which push and pull against anything in its path. A scalar field, the other word is standing waves, cannot be measured with our 3D equipment. Nevertheless, it encapsulates energy and information. And this is the same mechanism by which hands-on healers would deliver their healing, for example, and this kind of thing. It's all scalar. And when that is presented as a passive field, the body recognizes it as if it were in that space. So in this particular instance, I'm introducing the energy of the forest, the energy of the earth, in the form of fields which the body will recognize. Now where this gets more interesting, and it's the bit that I glossed over in the talk, is I mentioned a living field of consciousness which is beyond our own. Now there's a trick here. When you introduce a more refined consciousness into a space, your own consciousness cannot help but be intrigued, let's say, and reach out to connect with that. In that reaching out, and of course downloading from that what it needs, but it's really served up on a plate in this instance. That's why you could feel it so tangibly. It's not something that you have to kind of go and get anymore.
Right.
It has been stepped down to here.
No, the entities that I channel were immediately present in a way that I usually have to open something.
And that is because of a stepping down. It's like the this is not related to talking about the electricity grid to propagate this, but I'll use the same. I'll use the electricity grid again, which has different voltages. Yeah, for the main lines from the power station, and it's stepped down and so on. In the same way, non-electromagnetic energies, which we live and breathe through our own personal vortex, which I was talking about, our connection with our higher levels, those exist also at different levels, and it takes a lot of practice, advanced meditation practice, let's say, to connect directly with what would be called a logos energy, a very highly refined energy. You'd have to probably be a Tibetan monk or something to be regularly in the practice of doing that. It's all changing now, of course. This is becoming more accessible to everybody. But traditionally, let's say, some people are more comfortable accessing it stepped down a little. And that's where we would talk of earth energies, for example. So once the planet has kind of digested it to a certain level, it's a little more accessible. Now what the body uses directly is what we call chi. That's stepped down even further in voltage. So it's a stepping down process. And the field which I referred to is something which I'm able to receive with a device that I've built, receive, step down, slow down so that we can actually work with it, use it. I spoke of audio technology, so it can actually be recorded and played back and retrieved in that form.
So we're speaking about accessing a field.
Yes.
there are many different fields.
There are indeed.
So what field exactly is it that you're creating
the
access
field
to
exactly, and it is exclusive, and anything that isn't it is bumped away again. There's a security system built in.
This is also a big question.
It's
yes.
important. Yeah. So the beings I'm working with are quite well known in the sound healing world, and that's the Hathors.
The Hathors, okay.
So Tom Kenyon is the most famous
channel
of the Hathors. He channels them through his voice, makes these multi-track recordings, which are very powerful. They sound a bit weird, maybe, because it's of course through his voice and all across this 4-octave range. And I set out, naively maybe, to hear the music of the Hathors directly. I wanted a way of accessing that directly.
Not through a channel.
Not through a channel.
Right. So are you a channel as well?
I am not the channel in this instance, no. Because that would limit what comes through to your filters. Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead I set out to create a device with a big programmed crystal.
Who programmed the crystal?
Who programmed the crystal is, you do ask the right questions. The crystal, the whole process had to happen via channeling. The whole idea had to come through channeling. So what we work with are record keeper crystals, who are, some would say some would define this as accessing Akashic information directly. So the record keeper crystal, we have 5 of them actually.
Right.
This particular record keeper crystal seemed to link in with somebody, a human, on Atlantis. So different time, different realm of technology, and
I get goosebumps.
Right.
I've had 2 days of Atlantean contacts.
Okay. So this is an Atlantean contact who assisted very joyfully. He was also seemed to be very interested in experimenting with this as well, in creating this device to receive the music of the Hathors, because that's what I set out as the remit. The programming of the crystal had to happen, through me, but it was him. I just acted as the channel from the record keeper crystal to the crystal. And
sorry, what's the Hathor connection to Atlantis? And are we speaking about...
None whatsoever. This was me with my... I say none whatsoever. I bet there is one. But
you're not aware of what it is.
That wasn't the idea here. The idea was to borrow that knowledge to create something that would be able to receive.
Right.
And crucially, step down and slow down what came through so that we could make use of it. That was the starting point. And this turned into a technology for enhancing sound recordings, because that's what I do.
So enhancing in terms of changing their megahertz?
In terms of adding an aura which is normally lost.
So this is not changing the megahertz within the sound. This is
not changing the sound that's recorded. This is adding a field. At a very low level, a signal, an oscillation, because this equipment translates something which is multidimensional and way beyond our grasp, translates it into an oscillation, in other words, something within our dimension, which contains fractally embedded in it, it's the crucial thing, enough information to recreate the original.
Okay, so it's fractal, so it's not reducing it.
It's not reducing it, it's stepping it down.
So that it's accessible by this biology.
That's right. And the way that is presented is as an oscillation, and that's something that I can mix into sound recordings.
So can you back up a second? So back up a second, because I want to go back to the record-keeping crystal accessing the Akashic field. How do you know it was the Akashic field? Because in Atlantean times there was esoteric knowledge that was stored in other places in the galaxy, which would not necessarily be identified as the Akashic field.
I'm calling it that because
But you're not
it is
certain that
it
that's
is my
the...
information that record keeper crystals
Okay.
access the Akashic field.
Okay.
If that's wrong, then apologies.
No, I'm
That's
just interested.
That's what that's how I understand it.
Uh-huh.
I don't have enough information to back that up any further.
Okay.
We use a number of record keeper crystals with different consciousnesses to assist with different tasks. And,
who is we?
My wife and I.
Okay.
And in fact, she's the channel. I'm the one who kind of asks the questions.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's equally important. Neither of us could do it on our own.
And do you know who the two of you are and where you've come from?
As far as we are aware, but I mean, this is not provable, but I mean, as far as we're aware, we met in the sort of late times of Atlantis.
Uh-huh.
So, and have spent many lifetimes associated with one another in various forms.
Do you know the crystal labs in Atlantis?
It's not something I've looked into, no.
Uh-huh.
So I think so this technology I'm telling you about, it's important to realize this is just the background. This enables me to play back an oscillation which resonates a multidimensional field in the space, but in a very accessible form. And that's just if you like, a background. So I can then request from the Hathors, they are connected with this
mm-hmm.
by invitation, nobody else is. Mm-hmm. I can request anything we want for a particular purpose. And in this instance it was, please give us something that we can play back in a device to protect against the damage of electromagnetic radiation.
And what how are they? So how are? I mean, they're gatekeeping in terms of other entities not interfering in this.
There is also some other security.
And what's the security? What's creating the security?
There are various crystals, obsidian, mirror, various devices that basically scare things away by their own shadow, and in our experience, this has been 100% reliable. So, as I say, this is the background. This gives me a tool,
mm-hmm.
But the creation of a device which you plug into the wall and then somehow magically all this appears in the room, that could have taken decades
mm-hmm.
actually to come up with.
Mm-hmm.
So again, channel technology,
right.
it's what we have to do now.
We're getting a lot of help right now.
We're getting a lot of help, we need a lot of help.
Yes.
It's there. It's the only way, I think, now, because our damaging technology has overtaken us. Now we need some help quickly to really, it's becoming about survival now,
mm-hmm.
you know. So
I think it became about survival quite a while ago.
Quite a while ago, that's right. And we're just about waking up to it.
We're in the fulcrum of it right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the device, this is called the Calmspace.
The Calmspace. C-A-L-M
That's
space.
right. This exists thanks to, again, a channeling process. It was built, if you like, in the ether first, then built once in the physical,
mm-hmm.
and it worked. So there's a lot of trust required
mm-hmm.
in that process. If you start doubting and experimenting and bringing in trial and error and human intention, then you actually start to distort things.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea here was to really have this formed from a perspective where it can be seen perfectly to be right,
mm-hmm.
without any doubt, then build it.
And your wife had the ability to see it in this etheric form, or did you have some way to see it in the etheric form?
It was through asking the right questions.
Okay.
So, for example, one person's work, and this is not just channeling entities, there are humans who have helped as well,
Right.
is looking out for the synchronicities there as well.
Right.
One researcher said, you need to look up Marco Rodin. So I did. And that turned out to be absolutely the key to how to program the liquid crystal. There is a liquid crystal resin in the device, in the Calmspace Pro.
And what's the liquid?
It's copal resin, right? Same stuff as amber, right? But it's just not ancient. And
is it alchemically prepared in some way, or is it used?
I do that.
So
it comes as the raw thing.
Right.
It's dissolved in alcohol to create a liquid, which makes it receptive to the programming. The programming, to do it responsibly and in a balanced manner. By balance, the balance I refer to here is energy and information. Those two aspects have to be perfectly balanced, otherwise the body cannot assimilate it. So energy without data causes stress. Data without energy to support it can cause overwhelm. So to create this balance, I was guided by a human being, a very advanced researcher. He said, take a look at the Rodin's coil. So I built this, or had this coil built, and in the very center of that coil you have that perfect balance. It's the same as at the heart center for us, in the center of our toroidal field. You have that perfect balance. That's why we can create from that point. It's called the creation point. And so I kind of reversed that, if you like, in the sense of using the torus as the to put through this oscillation I was talking about that brings about the field, but then to tap that off right in the center where you have that perfect balance. And only when that was done, because there were 2 iterations of this product, both channeled, but I had to be up to speed to channel the right thing. The first iteration didn't have that balance. Then we worked on it. So that's thanks to human help. But otherwise, this was very much about creating something on a higher plane, building it once. Especially with scalar waves. If you start introducing human intention, as in mind intention, as opposed to heart intention, which would just happen, once you start willing something into being, you actually put a spin on that field, and that spin is something that will cause stress.
This is very interesting. I think we're going to have to break now and come back so that we can honor our other speakers today. But would you come and sit with us again a bit later so we can continue our conversation?
Yes.
Okay. So this has been Simon Fox, and we will come back with a second episode